And as Celebration, yeah, I'm gonna go with Celebration. Yeah, that works. Anyway, as Celebration, we're gonna do a review of all the DLCs. There's not gonna be spoilers for the first part of the review, but when I start getting into the story, there will be some spoilers. I picked the Kane suit, or sorry, Scarlet Spider 2 suit for this. I just haven't worn it that much, so figured it might be fun to do for this. And it's a pretty cool looking suit. So, gameplay varies from DLC to DLC. There are 3 of them. They kind of form their own source story, but they're also separate, so they can be played separately. If you're going to just play them separately, I recommend doing the 3rd one. And, but then following up, getting a review on what the storyline of the first 2 are. Central Park is fun to swing among. So, the gameplay in the first 2, at least for the story missions, I did not find that enjoyable. They were okay, but they didn't, for the most part, they didn't do that much. It felt more stressful to play through them than actually fun. So it felt like they got the balance a little bit wrong on most of those. In the second one, they had a sequence in the bar with no name. I was a little bit disappointed because in the comics you have all like the costumed villains in the bar with no name. And in this one it was just henchmen. But getting beyond that, they had actually a really good stealth mission through the bar with no name. That was actually pretty unique. They don't have a level like that anywhere else in the game. And it was a really fun mission. So storyline play-wise, that's in the second one, Turf Wars, and that one was probably the best level of Turf Wars of the story missions. So yeah, it's like I said, gameplay could have been better on the first 2. On the 3rd one, the storyline gameplay was actually really, really enjoyable, a lot more enjoyable than I was expecting it to be. So I think it rates a lot higher in my book. When you have low expectations and something turns out to be, you know, a lot better than you thought it would be, you tend to think of it in better terms. So I think that's what happened with Silver Linings. You finally got a fight with Silver Sable, which I think a lot of people were looking forward to because, you know, in the main game she just beats you up a few times and then you finally get a chance to actually fight her. So that was really good. And yeah, it was, for the story, can't speak. The story missions, like I said, best gameplay for story missions is in Silver Linings. First 2 were just, they felt more aggravating and annoying to me than actually fun. Except for the bar with no name level in Turf Wars. So that's where we're at with that. Side missions, I actually really enjoyed the side missions. I think they did a good job with side missions on all 3 DLCs. And they varied them from DLC to DLC, so you weren't always doing, it wasn't just like a copy of the same thing over and over again. Which was a good idea. But also it's like, if you really liked a certain side mission and then they didn't repeat it, it was a little bit aggravating, but, you know, I think they made the best choice in doing that. Yeah, and they have, for the most part, your basic side missions going through there. There's the finding type missions. There are, as you go along, there's screwball challenges, which are similar to the Taskmaster challenges in the main game. And those were, for the most part, pretty fun, although some of them could get a little bit, you know, aggravating, and you're like, how do I do this? I'm not a personal fan of timed missions because they stress me out. Excuse me. So that's where I'm at on that. But yeah, for the most part, they were pretty fun. And like I said, all of the side missions are fun and worth playing. They added kind of storylines to them. I'll be honest, they did these, what were they called? Yeah, brain just went dead on what they were actually called, but, the base missions. Ugh. You know, I need to learn how to think before I do these videos, I'm just saying. But yeah, they had base missions on Silver Linings, and they were pretty fun. I was a little bit worried that they were going to start to get a little political. in it. They had a slight political thing happen as you accomplish the base missions in it, but you know, they handled it okay, and it was fine, I think, for it didn't make a particular political stance like I feared it would. I'm actually really nervous when something that is political enters into my entertainment nowadays, because way too often it suddenly becomes a kind of a conformist type thing, as you have to absolutely agree with this particular point of view, otherwise you can't enjoy the storyline, and so I get really nervous when that happens. But fortunately, it didn't turn out that way, and I, you know, applaud them for doing that in that particular way, so that everyone can enjoy it, even if they don't agree politically. Always a good, you know, it's just a classy thing for anyone to do. So yeah, let's look at the gameplay on all of them. Now, this is where you might want to turn off if you don't want spoilers, because I'm going to be talking about the story missions in each of them, and what I thought of each of them, why I, you know, which story missions worked, which ones didn't. So first and foremost, it's not... These are more like the fun little Spider-Man stories. At least, you know, by the time you get through Silver Linings, it's like that, although it has some darker moments. And it's not like the good but kind of heavy storyline in the main game. Which, you know, the main game had a really good storyline. But they didn't do that for the DLCs, and I think that was actually a good move. You know, so it doesn't feel like they're competing, storylines are competing with each other to find the best one. So yeah, give them credit for doing it that way. So we'll start with the Heist DLC. I've said it before, I'm not a big fan of Black Cat. I've liked a couple of her appearances. I actually really liked when she showed up in the video game Edge of Time, Spider-Man Edge of Time, if anybody's played that before. It wasn't precisely Black Cat, or it wasn't the same Black Cat as we've seen before, but it was still, you know, it was an enjoyable appearance by her. And she's one of those characters that can be really good, but then oftentimes is written with all the these negative traits that I just don't like. And her character in the Heist was pretty much heightened all the negative traits. So, what I mean by negative traits, she's basically, can be described as an abusive partner. She's emotionally manipulative, emotionally abusive to Peter Parker. And she plays on his senses of sympathy, his, you know, affection, and his actually just trying to help her. She preys on that. And that's, like, the worst aspect of her, from my personal standpoint. I just don't like that part of her. I don't like to see, you know, I like Peter. I don't like to see him hurt, and I think that Black Cat really, really hurts him in ways, you know, I can respect a villain who like, comes up and tries to beat, you know, Peter Parker up. That makes sense, but when you just do that to his emotions and feelings, I don't like that at all. And this version of Black Cat definitely did that. Whoa. Ah! I'm over water! So, to describe exactly what I mean, and here we're really getting into spoilers, she shows up again, she talks about, she claims what she's doing is because Hammerhead has her kid, and she doesn't say it, but she heavily implies that, Spider-Man is the father of her child. Now, you don't put a guy through that, okay? As it turns out, she didn't have a kid, which I think pretty much everyone saw coming, but, you know, you don't say that to a guy. And, you know, just by telling him that, it not only affected Peter Parker and made him just hurt him, basically, it also affected his relationship with Mary Jane. When he mentions that to her, and that upset her. That actually could have potentially ruined his relationship with Mary Jane, and that really, really, you know, annoys me. And unfortunately, Mary Jane was able to kind of deal with her feelings and overcome her issues with it. I'm very happy about that. You know, like a lot of people, I really like that relationship between Peter Parker and Mary Jane. It's one of my favorite comic book relationships, and it's nice to see At least while they had it. They've changed it in comic books now, but it's nice to see them having, you know, a comic book character who actually has a good, solid marriage and relationship with somebody. You know, which they had for many years until somebody decided, yeah, let's change that and ruin it. But, you know, I'm going off on a tangent. Regardless, back to the storyline, she basically is after a ton of money that the Maggios hid, and, you know, she kind of teases Peter along with, you know, if you do this, maybe I'll reform, or, you know, they have my kid and I need your help in doing this, otherwise my kid will get hurt and it might be your kid. You know, it's a horrible relationship, and it's not. Her character can be really good if she doesn't have that negative quality, and just, I really, you know, after playing this game, I don't want to replay the heist, that's for sure. But also, I don't want to read any Black Cat comics because of all that negativity. It just feels like she's going to be coming back with more negativity, and I'm just like, you know, if I see a Spider-Man comic and I see Black Cats in it, I'm probably going to say, no, I'll try something else. So, that's just my take on the whole thing. One of the side missions, once again, spoilers. You know, I keep saying spoilers. Yeah, you guys get it by now. I should stop saying spoilers. Regardless, there's a side mission, which is one of those that, honestly, all the twists in the heist I saw coming. I think a lot of people probably saw them coming too, but you're approached by a police officer who informs you, gives you some good information about the original Black Cat, was a man, like, years ago, who was actually, as we discover, Felicia's, the current Black Cat's father, and basically asked you to help him find these old paintings that were hidden by the original Black Cat. And as you go on, you get a lot of information, which is good, about the Black Cat and all that stuff. But, you know, as it turns out, which, yeah, like I said, I saw this coming a mile away, and I think a lot of people probably did as well. The police officer turns out to be the original Black Cat. And Peter was helping a criminal again. Which is, you know, that seems to be a theme, at least in this. It's happened a couple times in the comics, but it seemed to happen quite a bit in this game, was that Peter was tricked by the criminals into helping them. Which is like, okay, it's one of those things that, you know, every once in a long while can work in a comic book, of having a criminal trick the superhero, but it seems like it was overdone in this game. But it was, I enjoyed the side mission, finding the paintings and recovering them and so on. It was enjoyable for me. It may not be to everyone's taste. So let's move on. At the end, Felicia fakes her death at the end of the heist, although we don't find out if she's actually alive or dead until Silver Linings, but I had the vague suspicion she'd still be alive because I really didn't want to see her again. So I felt like, you know, just pessimist that I am, that she was still alive. Regardless, let's move on to Turf Wars. Turf Wars pushes the emotion, I think. I think it felt forced, the way they push the emotion. So, right at the beginning, you meet... how to describe this guy? You meet a police officer, and there was an old episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000. It was I Was a Teenage Werewolf. They did, but at one point, one of the characters announces that he's gonna walk home through the woods, and one of the robots says, "Ding, ding, 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 victim." That's pretty much what happens with this police officer. He pretty much says, "Hey, look what my kid just got me. It's a Spider-Man watch," to Spider-Man, and talking about it, and it's like, okay, you know this guy's not going to survive. It was... it just... excuse me. It just felt like it was very clearly telegraphed that, oh, this guy's going to be dying for pathos in it, and of course he does, and Yuri starts to get a little bit upset by this, which is understandable. I know, I don't know if you've ever watched him. There's a guy called The Amazing Lucas. He does YouTube videos. He's pretty entertaining. He's a conservative commentator, but he also comments on video games and stuff. So I watch him because he's very entertaining, and I agree with some of his points. Anyway, back to my point. One of the things he said about Turf Wars was that he just didn't get Yuri getting so angry about this. And, you know, I think he missed the point. I'm going to come right out and say it is... And I think anyone who knows police officers or who has been a police officer and been in charge, or a soldier or something like that, and has been in charge of men in dangerous situations where you lead them into combat or other situations where they could get hurt or killed, you know, recognizes this. You're responsible for them, and when they get hurt or killed, it's personal. It's very, very personal to you. So Yuri's reaction to her men being killed and Hammerhead not really being stopped is completely understandable to me. She gets really mad. She is, you know, pretty much a straight-laced cop, but she has kind of... She's got an intensity, you know, an intense sense of justice, of, you know, wanting to do the right thing and protect her own people. And that comes out in Turf Wars. The actual gameplay... So we'll return to Yuri in a second. They made what I think was probably a mistake, although they did it in the comics too. But I think they've done it way too much in comics, which I think it undermines the character. This is just my personal view. Was they put Hammerhead in a power suit? Now, it seems like they do that with a lot of characters who don't have, you know, superpowers per se. They say, okay, we need to make them tougher. Let's put them in a power suit. And it's like, it undermines how tough they are. And I think they got it wrong. Hammerhead was just a bad choice to do this with in the comics and in this video game. He's plenty, you know, he's a tough guy. He's just a tough guy, and he's, you know, a pretty good challenge for Spider-Man to take on. You know, how he originally was and so on. He's got, you know, a heck of a headbutt. And putting him in a power suit, I think, undermines just... you know, how it makes him seem weaker than he actually is, and I think that was just a mistake. But they put him in a power suit, and so they go on with it, and you have the final fight with him. You have to kind of save some Maggio bosses that he's trying to drown in cement, and then you fight him. It's a pretty good fight. Saving the Maggio bosses fight was really annoying because you had to keep fighting these guys, and you had to, you know, stop people from turning on the machine, which. I don't know, it just... Couldn't Spider-Man break the machine or something? I mean, it just felt like it was, you know, an unnecessary type thing to do. Like a video game contrivance, I think, is a good way to phrase it. It just felt like it was a little too much of that for me. Okay. So... yeah, anyway, you get up there, you fight him, and it's a pretty good fight. Challenging, and so on. So at the end of the fight, Yuri comes out, traps Spider-Man, which, in the same way Silver Sable does with one of those electric bands that kind of hold Spider-Man for a second, which is like, you know, cuts in Spider Senses just don't seem to be working very well in the cutscenes. I'm just going to say that. It just looks like, because Silver Sable did the same thing to him. Regardless. Traps him, and then she ends up shooting Hammerhead, you know, in the head with a blast. And, of course, gets put on probation. She probably would have been arrested, truthfully, but, yeah. Like that. But, yeah, it's an understandable action on her part. And it turns out he appears to be dead at the beginning, but then if you watch the credits all the way through, he's alive and shows up in the Silver Linings. Like I said, Yuri's actions are completely understandable in this, and it makes sense to her character. So, you know, I give it... I think they did that quite well. It worked, and it was quite well. So, we move on to Silver Linings, which, like I said, this is the one where the gameplay of the storyline was really good. Was really enjoyable. And I didn't really find it... the previous Turf Wars or Heist as enjoyable as this. So, yeah, pretty enjoyable. Starts out with, you know, the knowledge that everybody figured out that Hammerhead survived. so it wasn't like a big surprise or a secret to anyone. And Silver Sable returning to the city to reclaim her technology that Hammerhead's stealing. And then it leads... So Spider-Man at the beginning is fighting Silver Sable's Hammerhead's goons. And ends up... And Silver Sable shows up and tries to, you know, nastily interrogate everyone. And you have to stop Silver Sable from, you know, killing the people you're trying to arrest. And you finally get to fight her, which was like, you know, just the best way to open up, you know, the DLC. That I think everyone who played it really appreciated the fact that you could finally fight Silver Sable and she didn't just, you know, beat you up in a cutscene. So that was a pretty good fight. So you go after the technology with Hammerhead. Or you go after Hammerhead, who's going after the technology. And turns out he has used the technology to upgrade himself to the point where he's pretty much a cyborg. Now, you know, I'll give the writer props for this. The writing made it look like it was something Hammerhead would do. But it also seems, you know, just, it doesn't seem like a really good Hammerhead choice to make, if that makes sense. You know, I could see him like oh, I have this power, I'm going to upgrade myself. But it also doesn't seem like, you know, it doesn't seem to be Hammerhead at his best. We'll put it that way. And I theorized before, I think Silvermane would have been a better choice to have done that. And I think they may have tried to get Silvermane and couldn't. And that's why they did Hammerhead. Just theorizing on my part, I don't know for sure. Regardless, Hammerhead has become a cyborg in this. Ends up, you know, after a lot of confusion with you and Silver Sable, you end up teaming up, sort of, to go after Hammerhead. And, Hammerhead ends up kidnapping Silver Sable and upgrading himself. And you're about to get killed when Black Cat shows up and saves you. You know, a little Deus Ex Machina to let everybody know that Black Cat is still alive. Yay. Regardless, she gives you some information about Hammerhead, and you use that to work with Silver Sable to find weakness for Hammerhead. Eventually, you go to, Silver Sable turns off a cloaking device on the boat she's been using as a base, which lures Hammerhead to her. And you have a big boss fight with Robot Hammerhead and some of his goons on a Silver Sable base. It's a lot of fun, and doesn't end up as serious as the previous ones ended up. So yeah, that's pretty much the storyline. More interesting, at least to me. And sorry, back to that. Like I said, the Silver. It's not a hard, serious storyline like the original game, or like the original gameplay was. It was like one of those fun little short Spider-Man, you know, 2 or 3 part thing you'd find in comics. So it was a lot of fun. I'm glad they did at least silver linings that way. So a couple of side missions, however, I found interesting. I'll go over the 3 of them. The ones I was nervous about was the base operations, where you're basically... Silver Sable's from a country called Simkarian, which I don't think is a real country. I haven't looked it up, I could be wrong, but it's in the midst of a war, and there are supplies and stuff that have been stolen by Hammerhead's men. So you start working with a former Silver Sable guy, a guy who quit working for Silver Sable, who's trying to recover all this stuff. And those are the base missions, is to, you know, recover all this equipment. He's obviously hiding something, as you find out from there, and as you get through it, you discover that he's lost his immigration status, his visa status and immigration status. And this was the part I kind of got nervous about, because it would be so easy to make that political, to just, you know, push a politic on you. But they really didn't. Spider-Man, you know, contacted Mary Jane, and she helped him. You know, the guy used to be a teacher, and so helped him get a job as a teacher, you know, so he wouldn't be arrested as an illegal immigrant for overstaying his visa. And it's like, okay, yeah, you know, nothing really too political about that. It's just like, okay, this is, you know, a decent guy trying to do a decent job and got caught up in circumstances beyond his control. So, yeah, you know, it worked, and it wasn't overtly political. So I was very happy about that. That wasn't this whole, you know, preachy anti-Trump thing, which tends to show up way more often nowadays than I'm comfortable with when I'm trying to get entertainment. I'm not trying to listen to political theory when I'm playing games. Regardless. Excuse me. So I was happy it turned out that way. So the second of side missions is we finally get the end of the screwball missions. So we get to finally arrest Screwball. The mission to get Screwball was extremely annoying for me, I'll be honest. You have to like stop bombs from going off, and you have to do these these photo moments like you did and stuff, which actually don't really make much sense since you're trying to stop her. But it was kind of interesting storyline-wise because she'd become basically, you know, so obsessed with doing... Whoa! I thought there was an alleyway through there. She had become so obsessed with doing things for her fans, you know, that it's like everything had to be done for the fans, and she couldn't, you know, like herself. So it was a little bit tragic that she had gotten to that point. And yeah, it was good that you finally, you know, brought her down, and maybe she can get the help she needs now. Which, considering it's comic book and supervillains, probably not. You know, I like her as a character, and I'm kind of hoping she'll come back in the next one. Although, from what I understand, a lot of people didn't care for her character and didn't like her that much, but each their own. So, Screwball got some closure. But the most interesting one for me was the, there's a certain side mission, which I shall call the, Wraith side missions. I always get Wraith confused with Wrath, which is actually makes sense because the Wraith is full of wrath. So, Wraith is a vigilante in the Spider-Man comic books. And they actually had the steps leading to Wraith being... Yeah, Wraith. I had to pause for a second to see if I got the name right there. To her becoming Wraith. And yes, you find all these crime scenes, and eventually leads to the dead body of Mafia Killer, Maggio Killer. It was killed by Wraith, and like I said, they don't even use the name Wraith. It's big spoiler here. It's Yuri, and it's done in a similar manner to how the Black Cat missions in the original game were done. So, you know, it makes me think that Wraith is going to be showing up again in the sequel. We'll have, or not again, actually, for the first time, as Wraith in it. So that makes me excited. It is kind of sad to see Yuri push to that position, but she's actually... It's completely understandable, and it actually reminds me of how the Punisher was in the 80s and 90s. I actually haven't liked any of the Punisher comics in years, but, you know, I enjoyed the stuff they did with him in the 80s and 90s. I thought he was a good character then. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm kind of excited that Wraith is going to be showing up. It's going to be, I think, add dimensions to Yuri's character, and it'll make for an interesting contrast in the Spider-Man 2 if they do indeed pursue it, which I'm hoping they will. So, yeah, that's kind of the hardcore review of all the, DLCs, of what happens, what we do, and what I think of them. I'm gonna go this way. And, yep, like and subscribe if you like it. Let me give you the full review. They are worth having. You can get some cool suits out of them, so that's always a good thing. And they do have some fun gameplay. Even if you don't like the main missions, the side missions gameplays can be fun for you, and it depends on what you like in a game as well. If you only want to get one, Silver Linings is definitely the one you'll want to get. I recommend you go on YouTube, watch playthroughs, or at least, you know, the cutscenes of the first two, before you play Silver Linings, but yeah, still pretty good. I'd say it's probably, if you paid for the full game, it's probably worth it to get the DLCs as well. Just for that little extra bit of gameplay. Anyway, that's my review. Hopefully you liked it. Here's a sunset. Here's the cane suit. Hopefully you like the cane suit. Not my favorite, but still a pretty fun suit. Anyway, I will see you in the next video. There's a lovely sunset. Bye.